Welcome to Malden and Schmidt, the podcast where we get to the bottom of the big questions about motoring and, importantly, how we make it more sustainable. My name is Nick Malden. I run a company called Emissions Analytics. We do real world independent testing, essentially to try and get to the bottom of what is really going on. With me is Oliver Schmidt. Oliver, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Oliver Schmidt. I've been working in the automotive industry in various positions for more than 20 years by now. But of course, for most people, I'm known by my involvement in the Volkswagen Dieselgate and the following imprisonment in the US, which
And we were on
directly leads us to our topic.
It does, and we were on the opposite sides of the table, now brought together to try and understand these big topics. So today we're talking about Joe Biden's tariffs on Chinese-made battery electric vehicles. In the last couple of weeks, he's quadrupled those tariffs. So if you want to import a vehicle from China into the US, 100% is added to the price of the vehicles. Clearly designed to protect the domestic US car manufacturers. It'll obviously have the effect of making electric vehicles more expensive for European consumers. America, in a sense, can do that. Europe is stuck in the middle. Europe is in the middle of a process of considering whether it imposes tariffs on Chinese vehicles and will announce its deliberations soon. But focusing on the US side of it, the 100% tariffs, Oliver, is that good news or bad news for sustainable motoring?
I think we first have to jump a bit back and do a short history lesson. So the US is known for these protective tariffs. In the 50s, the US farmers exported chicken to Europe, chicken meat, and they exported this meat for a price point that was below the production cost of European farmers. So the European farmers couldn't sell their chicken meat anymore. So the European Union at this point decided, oh, we are going to put in a tariff called the chicken tax. Then the US decided, okay, we can put tariffs on other stuff too. You, especially at this time, Volkswagen, with your Type 1 delivery vans and panel vans and pickup trucks, you are threatening our industry. So we put a 25% tariff on any commercial vehicle. And this tariff has been in the US paper since then, since the 50s. If you're trying to import a pickup truck or any kind of commercial vehicle into the US, you are paying the 25% tariffs, which was the base point for this regulation for the EVs too, and which now Joe Biden quadrupled. And we can see in the past it worked perfect. There is no foreign pickup manufacturer in the US, and even the foreign manufacturers that came into the US, like Toyota, Nissan, some more successful, some less successful, they all started their production facilities in the US. So I think this shows that these kind of tariffs have been first protective for the domestic market in the US, and in the example of the pickup truck, it helped protect the local production and the local manufacturers. So I see that the same possibility here, but we are faced with a totally different problem, and this is the materials needed for building the electric vehicle. The question is, where do they get their rare earth materials from? Where do they get their lithium from? Where do they get their cobalt from? Do you have any idea?
At the moment in the US, this supply chain hardly exists at all domestically. So
Yeah.
when an
Yeah.
electric vehicle is built at the moment, most of those materials come directly or indirectly through China. Not that all that
Yeah.
mining
Yeah.
happens in China, but they have disproportionate command of the mines around the world, including in Africa. But importantly, and the bit that doesn't get a lot of attention, is the refining of these materials. The way people need to
Mm.
think about these materials is you have to dig up a huge amount of rock, crush that rock, process that rock to extract these rare earths and other metals, and it is also not so exotic. Copper, for example, is essential in
Mm.
these. There's a huge amount of energy intensive processing with a lot of nasty waste products. So at the moment, those batteries and other electronic components depend on China. The question is, America could, in my view, create those supply chains domestically. It has many of the raw materials, it has the space, it has the access to energy. And these protective tariffs are giving it the chance to do that. But I guess the question is, while that process is going on, what happens? What happens in terms of the environmental impact of vehicles? My view is that the industry will pivot a lot to hybrids, which will actually give quite a short-term boost to decarbonisation. But do you agree? Do you think it'll go to hybrids, or do you think
Yeah,
the US market will go to something else?
I would say for the US market, you're right. The US market will swing to hybrids. Hybrids is a known technology in the US. Toyota is selling hundreds of thousands of hybrids every year in the US. They are the main supplier of hybrid vehicles there. So I think in the US we will see if all these future regulation like LEV 4, the ZEF mandate, Tier 4, if all these will be put in place, we see a mandate for zero emission vehicles. So there are different scenarios. In some scenarios, they are at zero CO2 emissions in 2035. That's California with the ZEF2 or ACC2, as it's called, mandate. And then in the Tier 4 regulation for the rest of the US, for the federal states, we see that in 2032, I think it is, they want to have about 60% of electric vehicles in the federal states. So we see a big push there towards those vehicles. So the hybrid will only be an intermediate step in between those final scenarios of the new legislation. For the US, I totally agree. But the problem I see bigger is Europe. So what's
Mhm.
going to happen with all these Chinese vehicles that they can't ship to the US anymore? I think I have an idea where they might end up. They will end up in the harbor of Rotterdam or Bremerhaven, or I don't know where they land in the US, but in the UK. But I think we will get flooded with those vehicles if there are not any tariffs or any restrictions put in place here in Europe. Then we will get an abundance of these vehicles, and they will get treated like a Xiaomi smartphone or whatever smartphone. You buy it, you use it for 3 years, it passes inspections, maybe gets used for another 2 years, and then gets thrown away.
And so that leaves Europe and the UK as well in a very difficult spot, because
Yeah.
it has got itself on the hook of decarbonisation in the UK's case by banning the internal combustion engine by 2035. And essentially the only way it can achieve that is by allowing these Chinese vehicles in. Why do I say that?
Yeah.
I say that because EV penetration is stalling currently, primarily because these vehicles are too expensive. The only option for cheaper electric vehicles is from China, partly because they have the economies of scale of doing it, but also partly they are on an export push. They are deliberately
Yeah.
very aggressively pricing these EVs. So they are offering to Europe what Europe, in a sense, wants. But the question is, does Europe really want that? Does Europe really want the consequences? Or will they decide, actually, when faced with the prospect of that, will they pull back? What do you think? Do you think Europe might pull back, might switch to hybrids, might go back to some prior
Yeah,
technology?
yeah, yeah. I think it depends on the country. If that happens, I think we will see a resurgence of diesel. We all know, you know from your studies, that current diesels are clean. They are not as dirty as they used to be. Even some people even claim they make the air cleaner than it used to be. I highly doubt that, but um, in some areas you can see conversion rates beyond 100%, but in most of the times that's not true. So for it, say I would predict Germany would go back to diesel. There are other states like France. I see the same there. France has a long tradition with their local manufacturers working on diesels. For the UK, you always say it will be hybrid. So I don't question that. You know the market better than I do. But I see then we will see a split between the technologies, and
Do you
and we
really
we,
think?
we, we
If I may interrupt, do you really think that diesel could see a resurgence?
yeah,
Do, do,
yeah.
I mean, from sitting here from the UK, the notion of that fuel is so tainted by Dieselgate that
Yeah,
even though you're absolutely right, the reality of it, the test data does show how clean it is. But
yeah.
how would European consumers convince themselves it was
I
okay to
think
switch
I
back?
think one way they get convinced would be if HVO 100 comes publicly available or
Can you
broadly available.
explain what that is, please?
That is basically, this is a recycling product of industry deposits like oil, like grease and everything. So this gets treated in a facility, and the resulting CO2 emissions are 70 to 90% lower than those of fossil diesel fuel. So there is not a lot available. There are only pilot production facilities at the moment, but this technology is spreading. If you go there, there are a lot of NGOs working for this, or yeah, let's call them NGOs. Like eFuels Now is a very known one on LinkedIn. They are working hard on this, and there are a lot of people that try to push this. So I think this fuel could give the diesel a push again, because then you can not only run your diesel, which has the better efficiency than every gasoline engine, not as a hybrid but as a gasoline engine. The fuel is cheaper than fossil fuel, even now coming from the pilot plants. We just did a comparison here in Germany. While the average liter of diesel is around 165, a friend of mine recently bought 400 liters of HVO, and he paid 154 for the liter of HVO 100. So it's cheaper than the fuel, and I think this will help to get a resurgence to diesel.
I think my view is that HVO requires a supply of waste oils and other feedstocks, as you describe, and
No, it's not
that's
only feedstocks.
but it's fundamentally limited. It's limited in terms of the amount that you would get, and therefore, and put that together with uh, the negative publicity around diesel. That's why I draw to the conclusion that hybrids powered by petrol, powered by gasoline, is more likely to be the technology of choice. Now, that as well can be synthetic or renewable, but it's likely that's the path of least resistance rather than the what I might say is more heroic challenge of trying to rehabilitate diesel. But maybe there's a
Yeah,
difference between UK and Germany. I don't know. Do you think the Germans can
I,
be, the
I,
German government can reconcile itself to renewable diesel?
the German government I leave out here. I don't want to get in a political discussion that might end bad.
This is a
But
politics-free zone, by the way, so you can say what you
it's a
think.
politics-free zone, exactly. And no, not that's what we decided in the beginning. No talking about politics and no jokes about the war. So,
Or Brexit.
but I disagree with you here, because the resources for HVO are unlimited. You can make HVO out of every product that contained oil while production. So if you think a bit further away, you can catch all the plastics out of the ocean, and you can refine this to HVO. You can dig up old dump sites, and you can get all the plastic out, and you can make this into HVO. So if you think a bit bigger than just the oil from French fries. This is the problem of the fuel. It always gets promoted as, oh, it's recycled French fries oil. No, it's not. It can be more. You can use any product that contained oil in the beginning as a base of the product. You can use any product there and make it into HVO 100.
Well,
So this is why I think this has a huge potential that's currently underestimated.
okay. Setting aside the politicians in Germany, though, how do you sell that to the consumers? Do you think actually German motorists would actually be very happy to keep their diesel engines and fuel it with reprocessed plastics?
So that's a good point. So yesterday, one of our famous news anchors here in Germany did a special because we had a bank holiday yesterday. So on bank holidays, we don't have commercial on television. So, and then they always make short shows. And this news anchor of one of the major news shows here on the television. He made a show about vehicles, and he went to the heart of the German car industry, the area around Stuttgart, where Porsche, where Mercedes, and most of the suppliers are. And he did all these interviews there, and he asked the people, "So, what kind of car are you driving?" And he was always expecting that somebody said electric. Nobody said electric, and most of the people said, "Yeah, I'm driving a diesel." And then they say, "Yeah, I'm driving a new diesel with Euro 6D temp or something like this, and this is a clean vehicle." I think people understood that diesel was dirty, and they also understood that diesel can be clean now.
Changing the direction slightly, that what you describe, or what people are beginning to experience, is the difference between vehicles as mediums of independence and items which are effectively bits of personal electronics. That
Mhm.
seems to, from my perspective, seems to be setting up. In a sense, electric vehicles are not just different in detail from internal combustion engines; they're almost different in type from them.
Yeah.
And why that's relevant is that um, we've talked about Chinese dominance in the manufacturing of electric vehicles, but there also comes into view the security dimension to this as well.
Yeah.
What do you think? Now, and so could China remotely switch off all the electric vehicles on European roads, or more likely, could it contrive one vehicle to crash at peak time on a major motorway and just generally cause chaos on European roads? I mean, from what you know about how vehicles are engineered in the electronics, do you think those security fears? Do you think that's another aspect that should weigh in people's minds?
Yeah, but why shouldn't the Chinese not be able to do what Tesla can do today?
So to tell what at the most extreme, what can Tesla do today?
Tesla can switch off features on your vehicle. So Tesla, the whole communication between Tesla workshops, Tesla factory, and your vehicle is over the air. So all diagnostics, every software update is run over the air. So you don't need to go into your workshop. You don't need to plug in an OBD scanner. You don't need to do a readout of the stored fault codes. You can. It's all done over the air, and all the software updates are done over the air. And every time Tesla releases a new software updates, you see a few, I would say it's maybe per mil, it's not even percent of vehicles that get stranded during this process. So they get their new software, and somehow, for whatever reason, I don't know whose fault it is, this software update gets interrupted. And we know all this when you put in the begin in former times, when you updated your computer from Windows 3.11 to Windows 95, and you interrupted the process, somehow your computer didn't start anymore. And that's exactly what's happening with the with Tesla vehicles on the road. And they can switch off features. I can't remember which it was. They recently switched off one of the features that was on a Tesla, which is now not anymore. Or they can deny vehicles that have a refurbished title. They can deny those vehicles access to the fast charger system. So it's all possible. And if Tesla can do it, I'm pretty sure the Chinese can do it too. And if you are able to do all this, you can stop a vehicle immediately. If you want to, I guess that's possible.
So you're saying that that's a reality today. So
Yeah.
do you think that weighs very heavily in the minds of the European regulators? They seem up till now, in my view, to be extremely relaxed, at least
Yeah, this
publicly, about this aspect.
I, I think it's pretty funny here if we do the comparison to the US again. So in Germany, all the politicians are raving about, "Oh, now I have my TikTok channel. I'm on TikTok." And in the US, they are talking about banning TikTok. So this shows the different behavior towards Chinese technology. Or if we look at the 5G networks, in the US, they banned Huawei technology. If you go into any into any supply point for 5G waves, or in the technical rooms that are behind those antennas, in the 19-inch racks, most of the stuff is from Huawei in there. So I think there's a totally different sense of urgency between Europe and the US. And on the other hand, the European Parliament now puts fines on the on Meta, the holder of Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. They are putting fines on Alphabet as the owner of Google. So this is a totally different approach here. And I think somehow the Europeans have not the fear of Chinese technology and Chinese spyware like the US does.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why the European elections this year will be so critical. And if there
Yeah,
is a swing potentially to right, then that may lead to a change. I mean,
yeah,
certainly my interpretation of it, Europe has been wrong on a number of different areas.
yeah,
Europe is wrong in its belief that it can build the supply chains for all the battery materials and the rare earths for motors, that they can in practice build those locally in Europe. They are downplay the risks from China around the security
yeah,
fears, and what it leads, and they've overestimated the European citizens' desire to pay high prices for electric vehicles, which leaves them in a very simple situation: is either they keep their 2035 and 2050 greenhouse gas goals by
yeah,
simply importing Chinese technology in vast amounts and suffering the consequences, or they will need to pull those targets. That's it. And my view is they will go for the latter, but they will go for it in a classic European way of not junking the headline, but by watering it down by lots of different small
mm,
weakenings behind the scenes in very technocratic ways. And so I think we'll end up with something that is probably approximates to what the Americans are doing, but in a much less visible and less honest way. I mean, I do think that, contrary to reports, the US generally has a much more progressive and clear and honest approach to emissions regulation than Europe. But tell me if you disagree with that. But I think that's my characterization of the situation, and I would encourage listeners to watch out for the quiet weakening of the European
yeah,
greenhouse gas goals
yeah,
over the next
yeah.
month.
This is exactly what happened with the Euro 7 regulation now. Everybody was talking how stringent Euro 7 will be, and then we have seen the watering down approach that took place in Euro 7. Um, and now Euro 7 is not a lot more stringent than Euro 6 used to be. So it has some stringency added at some places, but it's not the proposal that was on the table in the beginning. So yeah, you're right there. There is an approach in watering those down. But where I see the problem, I think there will be a split in the electric vehicles. So we will have those electric vehicles that get treated like a Xiaomi mobile phone that only gets used for a very short time, then thrown away. Or even better example, electric scooters. If you go in, it doesn't matter where you go here in Germany, you always stumble over these electric scooters. They are laying everywhere on the pavements. This is a reason why Paris already banned them. They didn't do it for fun. They banned them because these stupid things were laying around, and they lasted, according to those agencies that rented them out, they lasted about 2.5 months, and then they got thrown away. So I think this is what we will see with these electric vehicles. They will not have the build quality that we experience in the cars that we had in Europe, and we will have very high priced electric vehicles that get sold too. Like at the moment, we have a Porsche Taycan. Porsche Taycan is selling good. It's a good selling electric vehicle, or Audi e-tron, which is the same vehicle. And we will never people would accept, let's say, a Rolls Royce coming from China. Nobody would buy a Rolls Royce, an electric Rolls Royce built in the BMW factory in China. Nobody would buy this. Volkswagen had the huge problem when they started building Bentley Flying Spur in the Dresden factory from where the Phaeton is built. They could only market these Flying Spurs to certain markets where people weren't that passionate for British engineering. I think that a lot of those went to the East, like Russia, Ukraine, and countries like this. Their people didn't care about this, but to America, they could not sell a Bentley built in Germany. So I think this is what we will see. We will see a split. We will have these, I would call them throwaway vehicles. They will come into the country, I'm pretty sure. We cannot stop this. And we will have high end. And the question is, how do we fill the gap in between?
Well, we will pick that up on another podcast. I think we will wrap it up for today. But if I ask you one final
Okay.
question, if in 5 years' time in Europe, what do you think the powertrain, the high selling powertrain will be? Will it be diesel? Will it be hybrid? Will it be electric vehicle? What would your forecast be?
My prediction would be diesel.
Diesel.
My prediction will be so let's see, in 5 years time we have Euro 7. There's not a lot of stringency for the diesel in Euro 7. It only the RDE values go down a bit, but
That's
they meet them already nearly today. That's the only thing going down. And the stringency for gasoline engines, it's even more increasing. So the gasoline engine will get more expensive. So the price gap between the two vehicles will get smaller. So that makes the diesel even more attractive. And now I have a gasoline engine and I add a hybrid drivetrain to it. So then the hybrid is more expensive than the diesel. And I think this will be the problem of it.
Well, there we go. A prediction of the resurgence of diesel. Well, I would throw in that
So what's your
when
prediction?
well, I will predict gasoline hybrids, but
Okay.
I would recognize, when Otto Diesel invented the diesel engine, he envisaged it running on biodiesel, not fossil fuel diesel. And that is
Yeah.
sorry, Rudolf Diesel, not Otto Diesel. Rudolf Diesel.
Rudolf, yeah,
And
yeah. It's Nicholas
Rudolf Diesel.
Otto and Rudolf Diesel, yeah.
Yes, there we go. I mixed the two technologies seamlessly. Rudolf Diesel envisaged the engine running on biofuels, not fossil
Yeah.
fuels. Had we gone
Yeah.
down that path, we would be in a very different place right now. What you're saying is essentially his original vision might actually be seen out. I think probably in the reality, we will go down gasoline hybrids, but it may be that
We'll
those are
see.
not mutually exclusive. So let's wrap it up there. Very interesting discussion. Thank you very much, Oliver.
Thank you, Nick. And after all the predictions we made today, we will not predict this weekend's lottery numbers. Sorry to disappoint the listeners here.
No, I'm going to stick to automotive. But thank you very much. My name's Nick Molden from Emissions Analytics, and we'll join everyone next time. Thank you very much.